Hello, 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 people. Welcome back to the mufcMPB YouTube channel with your host today, Anil Kandola, joined, shock, yet again with another brilliant guest, sports writer and the brilliant, as I say, Sam Pilger. Sam, thank you so much for joining me again. I believe this is your second appearance alongside myself. Firstly, as I always like to ask my guests, how is the mental state at the moment covering Manchester United?
Well, it's the phony war period, isn't it?
Mm.
Nobody quite knows what's happening. Everybody thought the manager situation would be sorted by now. This season review looks a bit silly, really, because since it was started, there was decided it would be finished. There's only been the cup final, and we're now 2.5 weeks on. So it's a quiet period, but eerily quiet. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I could describe it any better than you just put there, Sam. And look, it's the elephant in the room, so much so that I think it'd almost be unfair to start anywhere else other than the future of Erik Ten Hag. You alluded to there, we were all under the assumption that we'd get at least a little bit of clarity in terms of what's going on with the managerial situation at Manchester United. But I think we haven't had anything of the sort, which, of course, I'm sure we'll speak about Ineos to Jim Ratcliffe and their ideas and plans and whatnot. But in terms of Erik Ten Hag, are Ineos leaning towards sacking him or backing him?
In short, I really don't know, and I would think that they were. I think they were certainly going to sack him before the cup final. But if you beat Manchester City as comprehensively and as impressively as United did, that gives you pause for thought. But this is 2.5 weeks on now, and a lot would say, why should one result, change their decision? Well, as I said, it was the best team in the world. United didn't fluke it and backs to the wall for 90 minutes. That was an impressive performance. And, the Kobe Mainu goal, United fans have watched that on a loop for 2.5 weeks. It's probably the best team goal of the whole season. So that gave some pause um, for thought. But I think they're in a difficult position because they're trapped between two underwhelming choices. I don't think they're particularly impressed with Erik Ten Hag. As I said, I think he would have, if he'd lost to City, he would have been gone on the Sunday or Monday. And they're not particularly impressed with any of the replacements. So they're stuck between gambling on another Ten Hag season, which they're not particularly keen to do, or gambling on a new appointment. And nobody that they've spoken to, and they have spoken to people, have they been that impressed with. So this brave new era, they're going to start it at this stage with a manager I don't think they entirely believe in, whether that's Ten Hag or the new appointment.
Yeah, I think just in terms of Erik Ten Hag, before we discuss the potential replacements or at least the
Yeah.
candidates that Ineos and also Jim Ratcliffe have spoken to, is Erik Ten Hag, would you say, in a situation where because of the hesitancy from board level, because of the unsure nature in terms of the viewpoint of Erik Ten Hag, that it will be a situation where if he was to be kept on at his role at Manchester United, that it would be a situation where he would just keep the remainder of his contract, or if they do decide to inevitably stick with Erik Ten Hag, could that even potentially lead to some pen to paper in terms of keeping him for a little bit longer?
I mean, there is that argument that if you're going to keep Ten Hag, you can't keep him just for one more year and see how it goes. You've got to back him with a new contract. But I think that would be a hugely brave move to back him on the back of finishing eighth. Yes, winning the FA Cup as well as he did, but yeah, they're in this difficult position that it might be a bit of a compromise and keep him for the final year of his contract, but then that winds down and they might be in a position where, come the autumn, they're regretting it. So that you'd think if they were going to keep him after they've treated him like they have, and it has been poorly. There's no doubt about that. You finish the season on a high, on a celebration at Wembley, and to be waiting 2.5 weeks. Um, Now, you can make that argument. Why do they need to confirm he's staying? Because he's just staying unless they say otherwise. But of course, the nature of United and how the season finished, and this talked about season review, means there has to be confirmation that he's staying or not.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Irrespective of if he's going to stay or not, I think the clarity needs to be shared, not just amongst the media for, as I say, clarification, but also amongst the fan base. They're up in arms at the moment, aren't they? With just a little bit of confirmation what's going to happen at the dugout in
Yeah.
terms of next season. But just before we move on to like transfer chat and potential incomings and all of that kind of stuff, let's talk about these potential replacements, or at least the candidates, as I've said before, that Man United have been discussing any potential contract with. What can you tell us? Shall we start with, I think, probably the most controversial name, one that has probably risen a few hairs on the back of people's necks in all sorts of ways in terms of Gareth Southgate. Now, before I give my opinion in terms of a Manchester United fan perspective, what can you tell us about Southgate? Because I do feel like with everything going on, with other candidates perhaps coming to an end of a potential move to Man United, it seems that just by process of elimination, that he's still in the picture. Some would say not, some would say he is. What can you tell us about Southgate and Manchester United? Is there any legs to this, shall I say?
I think there is legs, and I think there are supporters to it to for Southgate within. I mean, within United, obviously. Well, Dan Ashworth isn't within United yet, but obviously he will be soon. He worked with Southgate at the Football Association. Brailsford, Sir Dave Brailsford is known admirer of Gareth Southgate. There's no doubt he has his backers and his fans there. I mean, that's one thing to be a fan of him. It's another one to appoint him as Manchester United manager. I mean, you look at Jason Wilcox and Omar Bereda coming from Manchester City. Obviously, you think of their background. You think, well, Gareth Southgate would not be a potential replacement for Pep Guardiola when he ever moves. So it feels like there might be a divide there of the more people with a past relationship with Southgate. I think the thing is as well, they want a cog. That's clear. They want a cog in this structure, a coach. It'd be probably too demeaning to say a yes man, but somebody who's going to be a cog in the structure. And they do like Southgate. Those rumours won't go away. And of course, that is a worry because as well as Southgate has done with England, and he has done well, of course, a couple of penalties away from being European champions, World Cup semi-final. He doesn't have a great record against the bigger nations in international football. And plus, his record as a Premier League manager was average, to say the least. So there are huge. I mean, you'd think there was an issue as well with Marcus Rashford, one of United's best paid and poster boys. Obviously, he's dropped him from the squad. He didn't use him that much as he should have in the last World Cup. That initially there's a problem there, but I mean that's not enough not to appoint him. So, but the other thing is timing, obviously. So if England win the Euros, the first day he can turn up for at Carrington is the middle of June the 16th, 17th. That is far too into the season, or into the preseason. And if if England have a dreadful Euros and go out in the group stage where he can report for duty earlier, but it'd be such a downer, so deflating. Here's the England manager after messing up the Euros, where England have a really good chance of winning it. And also, obviously, the main point as well is international football is hugely different to club football. A few games a year, over 50 or 60. So, yeah, I don't know for sure, but I know for sure that Southgate has his backers there. But whether that's enough to get him over the line, who knows?
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation for Manchester United fans to be in, I think, in terms of having Gareth Southgate as the link to the potential managerial role. And simply put, because he's an individual who hasn't had a domestic job in nearly a decade and a half. And to put him in the job the size of the magnitude of Manchester United, for me, would be absolutely ludicrous. And I think, look, at the end of the day, as Manchester United fans, as supporters of the football club, we're desperate to see Ineos become successful and really rejuvenate that side and make them the champions of what they were in yesteryear. But in reality, it must worry a lot of Manchester United fans when you see a potential shortlist of someone of Thomas Tuchel's caliber, and then right on the other end of the scale is Gareth Southgate. And I think that almost is a little bit worrying in terms of that, because for whatever they're worth, they're two very different managers with very different approaches. So it does lead you to wonder and maybe even worry a little bit in terms of what actually are Ineos looking for. Because as you said there, it does make perfect sense. I'm trying my best not to use the phrase yes man, because it can be quite disparaging in all sorts of ways. But that clog, as you say, in this massive wheel of individuals really churning out results or whatever, But Tuchel doesn't really fit that mold, does he? And I think he's someone who is more of a, shall we call a, what's the word I'm looking for? Again, don't want to be offended to anyone or anything like that. But he's a maverick, shall we say? He's an individual
Yeah.
who really likes to take the ball by the horns. But again, as I say, it's a little bit worrying in terms of having such a contrast in potential managerial positions. And one individual who would fit the bill. And the one who we haven't really had too many updates on is a certain Roberto De Zerbi. Now, of course, he left Brighton, I would say quite abruptly, not surprisingly, but the nature in which it happened, it was very quickly, it was very amicable, which led to some people suggesting potentially he does have a new role or a new job in mind at the very minimum. So, what can you tell us from your side of things about Roberto De Zerbi? Is he interested in the Manchester United job? Is he a genuine link or a contender for the role? And as I say, what have you heard from your side of things in terms of De Zerbi
I,
to Man United?
yeah, I think. I mean, I know that Liverpool looked at De Zerbi and weren't overly pressed. I mean, I think he's done great things at Brighton, but he left under. I mean, you call it amicable or slight cloud. I don't think he was. I think he wanted more say in their transfer dealings. He will get a good job in Europe. I'm not sure that's United. I'm not sure this brave new era is going to be based on somebody who finished 10th with Brighton. Um, he has been on a shortlist. I think he has been considered, just as Liverpool certainly were interested. I think United have considered him. I would be surprised if he would be the job. I think if Southgate's underwhelming, so is De Zerbi really, and he doesn't have a job at the moment. So I suppose it'd be an easy appointment, but I think that would be a huge risk. He has no track record of dealing, in a big club or dealing with big players. So yeah, and I think, as you said, I think the slightly concerning thing with Ineos is the range of philosophies on their shortlist. From De Zerbi and Tuchel and Pochettino. That there are that if they want somebody to play in a certain way, they're certainly looking at lots of different approaches. So there doesn't seem to be much a coherent approach there in terms of the managers they've been after. But I just think I go back to what I think. I don't think they're impressed with the shortlist, and I don't think they're impressed with Ten Hag. And I think at this moment there is a huge concern that they're going to start this era next season with new CEOs and sporting directors, technical directors, but this manager under a cloud because they're just it's 2.5 weeks now after the cup final. Ten Hag doesn't know about his future. There hasn't been too many leaks, but we just know that. I mean, the meeting with Tuchel was obviously interesting, and that just proves United are not convinced by Ten Hag, and the fact they haven't made an appointment yet are not that important with his replacements. And if you think the vast majority of them, Pochettino, De Zerbi, Tuchel don't have jobs, so this wouldn't be a difficult appointment to make. Thomas Frank does again. That's do United want the Brentford manager who finished was it 16th or pretty low? Graham Potter, another one who's unemployed. The ones I suppose the only one on the list that is employed is well Frank and Southgate. So none of as I said, none of the replacements on the short list have jobs. So that could have been sorted very very quickly. It also makes a point of why are so many people on the shortlist don't have jobs. They should United should be looking for best in class and trying to steal or recruit from people who are on the up and up, which Ten Hag was. 2 years ago. That was an appointment everybody was impressed with. This list gets worse and worse and less impressive, really. And yeah, I mean, yeah, Tuchel is the word was United weren't so impressed, and obviously he says, "Well, I'm taking conveniently, I'm taking a year out, or not looking for a quick new job." Pochettino, they retreat from there, so everybody's sort of leaving the shortlist, and as we've said earlier, the one that's still sticking around is Gareth Southgate. But it's not a good position to be for a United being, especially as, and I'm sure we'll talk about transfers. A player will want to know, well, who's the manager?
Yeah.
So there is still too much confusion.
Absolutely. It seems as the weeks have gone by, there's been more confusion rather than any solutions. And I just had a picture in my head there of, the poshest job centre in the world having a big poster that says, "Are you looking to get into management? Manchester United are free." And we've got all of these very
Yeah.
recognisable names queuing up for the Manchester United job. But look, I think it's very difficult, and I just want to make a point, really, in terms of individuals like ourselves who are within the media, whether that's written or broadcasting or anything like that. We're desperate to bring not just Manchester United fans, but sports fans, football fans, updates, regular updates of what's going on. But I think it's very clear to emphasize and to state here that things do change quite a lot. Ever changing situations doesn't necessarily mean that information now is false because it's become dated. Dated information and false information are two very different things. And
No, no, yes.
no, no,
I
carry
think you're
on, yeah.
right, and I do think everybody on social media has become a critic and judges things. But as you say, things do change. I know there was a report in the Guardian a couple of days before the cup final
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Ten Hag was going to be sacked. Now, at that stage, my understanding was that that was true, and there wasn't too much pushback on it. But things do change, and obviously, the journalist or the newspaper get a lot of stick, but they have their sources and they ran it with it on the basis that they thought it was strong enough. It wasn't like their speculation he might be. It's like he will be. Well, things change, events change. What happens? And United won a cup final very well against City. So that made think, hang on. Are we sure? Are we sure we want to get rid of him? So things do change, and people get angry at the messengers, but things can change. Players are all lined up to sign, and the plug's pulled at the last minute. So yeah, with the manager, that's the most important appointment United will make this summer. Yeah, there's still or not or reappoint Ten Hag. Yeah, there's still confusion.
Yeah, absolutely. As you've alluded to there, the most important and pivotal transfer, if we can even call it that, or appointment or clarity that Man United fans can get, and also the club as a whole, is eventually and essentially the Manchester United boss. So, again, I think I've been saying this now and I sound like a broken record. It's certainly one to keep your eye out for. Let's move our attention slightly now in terms of the transfers, as you mentioned a little bit ago. This will be very difficult for Manchester United to operate in, despite them having senior members of their brand new board, and the Ineos control has begun at Old Trafford. As you say, it's going to be very difficult for them to navigate and almost send any individual for negotiation, because them negotiations will be very limited, considering nobody seems to know who the Manchester United boss will be. So, as you say, it'll be very difficult to sell a project to an individual that I'm going to mention now, in terms of a Michael Elise, someone who's seemingly at the end of his Crystal Palace career or journey, and he's ready now to take a step up, if you like. No disrespect, of course, to Crystal Palace. But Chelsea are, of course, involved. Manchester United are obviously heavily interested in Elise's signature. But what can you tell us about this? Because, as I say, it's very difficult, despite Chelsea and Manchester United being in fairly similar positions in terms of a
Yeah.
new ownership, trying to implement different styles and way of going about things. But in terms of Michael Elise, would you say at this stage he's more likely to join Chelsea than Manchester United?
I don't know. I think they're both interested in him. Obviously, Chelsea had the bid accepted for him last year, but he stayed. No, sorry, not accepted. Yes, he was accepted, but then Palace managed to talk him around, and he signed a new contract and stayed. It looked like he was all set for Chelsea. Um, Chelsea was a bit of a disaster zone for most of last season. And he was able to stay at Palace and develop and showcase his talent. So it wasn't the worst move. I think they're back interested in him again. There's an individual who he worked with previously. Elise, who is at Chelsea now. Oh, I've forgotten his name, but that's a pull. But I understand he's still interested in United. He's such a talented player. I wouldn't be surprised. And strangely, not at the Euros this summer. He certainly should be. He could play for England. He's sort of dedicated himself to France, but hasn't been picked for France. It's incredible. A player of his talent's not there.
Yeah.
I think he's possibly with the French Olympic squad though later in the summer. So I mean, Chelsea and United are certainly interested. I think City have been interested. Arsenal. He's an incredible talent that would be a benefit to any Premier League side, or in the top six. My understanding is there is a release clause. There was a release clause in the contract he signed last year. I think that's slightly complicated though. It might just be for Champions League teams, top four teams, which of course is not Chelsea or United this season. But again, as we've said, and this will be the case with everything, I know that United want to sign players on the basis of not who the manager is, but the style, and have some more continuity. But of course, as an individual, you want to know who the manager is going to be, and then that manager wants you. Now, at the moment, obviously United are talking to players and agents. Of course, it's the summer, it's June, but until they're able to say this is the manager, it'll be very difficult for a player to commit themselves. So that is one that is up in the air. Yeah, I think United do have a good chance, but certainly winning the cup final gave Europa League football. At least there's Europe there now. I think United would have struggled. I mean, it's still Manchester United. They still would have been an appeal, but I think having Europa League will help, certainly, with that cup final win. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be really, really interesting to see where he will end up because, as you say, he's a brilliant talent. I think everyone's really excited to see just how far he can go in his career. Let's turn our attention now to a young gentleman called Jared Branthwaite, another individual who I think is very unfortunate not to make it into the Euro squad. But I think this might, and I said this on TalkSport a couple of days ago, that this potentially, in terms of his domestic career and in his future, this could almost help him in a rather strange way because he's not away on international duties. He will be at home, as I said the other day, watching with the rest of us. So if you combine that, of course, with Everton's need to make a lot of money before the June 30th deadline, for those who don't know what that is, that will obviously be the profit and sustainability rules and the FFP, everything like that. So they're very desperate to make some money before June 30th. And Jared Branthwaite, of course, is a big asset to them in terms of turning some money in and bringing some valuable cash. But in terms of him, of course, as I say, just like Elise, he's also attracting interest from several top clubs in the Premier League. So, do you think Manchester United push for Branthwaite before June 30th? Of course, as I say, with Everton needing the money, but then as I say, you think the fact that the managerial situation is so up in the air that could prevent them from making deals early?
Well, I mean, I think it'll be resolved by the end of June, but I also think Brathwaite, I think that's a huge transfer fee. I think Everton, they do have by the end of June, possibly there might be a window for slightly cheaper, but that's a lot of money. That's 60, 70, 80 million, which seems an incredible figure for someone who hasn't made the England Euro squad, but I'm not sure that's a big chunk for United's transfer budget on one player. The thing as well, they do have a lot of centre halves. I know Varane has left. Martinez is back now. There's Lindelof, Evans. I think there's interest in him staying for another year. Lindelof, Maguire, Evans, Martinez back, Camboala, of course. So it's not an area United don't have enough players in, but do they have good enough players? I would suggest probably not. No, Martinez, I think, needs a top quality partner, and and it's interesting now because actually, obviously, with Varane left, Varane needs to be replaced because obviously Varane was a first choice centre half. He started the cup final. He was great again. It's rather a shame he's left, if I'm honest. But
Yeah.
I suppose his injury record was so poor that maybe it was inevitable. If you could guarantee a fit Varane, I think he would have stayed. But I think the money he still wanted, it was too much of a risk. And I think he missed so many games. So Martinez is sort of joined as the junior partner. He's still only 26. He'd probably be the more experienced partner. So can United risk pairing him with a younger centre half? Possibly. As I said, he was a junior partner to Varane. Now he might be the more experienced one. But I think Brathwaite would be a lot of money. I'd be surprised. I mean, there are cheaper alternatives. Obviously, there's the Nice centre half, Todibo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's Euro. So I think these would all be cheaper alternatives, and not to say not maybe even better players. So I'd be surprised at Branthwaite, especially at his what Everton would want, which would
Yeah.
be a huge fee.
Yeah, exactly. I think the old Manchester United tax comes into mind there a little bit,
Yeah,
especially
yeah.
when they're going for some players. Another player that I wanted to talk about was João Neves. Now, there's been reports coming out of Portugal that Man United have already had a £50 million bid rejected. What can you tell us about this? Is there weight to this story, or is this
I
again a little bit
I
of
think
paper talk?
Yeah, I think there's interest. I think you always have to be, and history tells us, skeptical of what comes out of the Portuguese media. They very much are mouthpieces for the big, Portuguese clubs, the big Lisbon clubs, Benfica and Sporting, especially Benfica. If you remember years ago, Gaetan was the player that was on the brink
Mm.
24 hours from signing for United constantly. So they talk up their players a lot and about meetings and so forth. Yeah, he is a player United are interested in, of course, because he's such a quality player. I think the problem is his release clause is enormous. I think 102, 105 million euros. And again, look at history. What does history tell us? Benfica are not a club that roll over. And they got João Felix to Atletico. That was 100 million euros. And Enzo Fernandez to Chelsea. That was over 100 million euros. So this is a club who are prepared to be patient and get the big money. And they see him as, the next big thing. I mean, interesting with Felix and Fernandez, they've not been huge successes. So maybe that will temper their price, but that's the release clause. Yes, of course, you can try and pay less than that, but I think again they'll want huge money, and I think United are trying to be a bit smarter in the transfer market, and these are huge fees for these players. I think there might be more 30-40 million pound players rather than 60, 70, 80. Look at the
Mm.
last player for 85, Anthony.
Yeah.
Huge failure. I'm sorry to say, but yeah, he has been contributed nothing really over 2 years. So there is that willingness to play a bit safer, maybe spend in the budget 30-40 on a player rather than 60, 70, 80.
Yeah, I think just before we move on to obviously some potential outgoings, there was just one more question in terms of any potential incomings that Man United could be looking at, which is, of course, the striker area. Now, it wouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that Man United would be in the transfer market for a striker, given the fact that it's only Rasmus Højlund now. And I think that's official, considering, of course, Martial has parted ways eventually with Manchester United recently. Of course, the news has come out in the last. I think it was even today that Benjamin Sesko, who of course is on the radar of reportedly anywhere of Manchester United and Arsenal as well. Of course, as I say, he's basically put pen to paper in terms of confirming his future at the club that he's at the moment. But where does that leave the potential striker market for Manchester United? Because, as you say, it's not going to be £100 million player. It's not going to be someone who's an absolute Galactico or superstar or however you want to frame it. But in terms of this striker market, as you've just alluded to, it will be probably at a limited or cut price budget, shall we say. What are Man United going to be looking at in terms of that department?
I think United have put themselves in a very difficult position with the striker, with Højlund there seemingly the sort of the main striker now. Yes, with Martial left. I think it's a very difficult sell, because if you look at Højlund, he would seem to be the starting centre half. So United have either got to go for another young. United, they can't
Mm,
sell it to them as they're not going for a Harry Kane. They're not saying you're the number 9, you're the main player, you're the main man. They can't do that because they've got a 72 million pound striker who had, on the whole, a very
yeah,
good first season. There were patches and problems, but 16 goals and an FA Cup, of which he played a role, and obviously he scored in the last couple of league games. 16 goals is a good, solid, and he was injured for a start. So players are going to look at that and think, well, hang on, you've got a 72 million pound player. Where do I fit in? So if it's a young player, you're thinking, well, you've got the young player already in Højlund, so someone like Sesko. But then if you're an older player, you're going to think, well, I am prepared to be a bit in the bench. I am prepared to be at the backup. So it's a strange pitch for United. They either get the older striker who's sort of happy to be there, a better Wout Weghorst, if you like, or a
Mhm.
younger striker who's prepared to be, but there's a bit of ego there as well. It's like who's going to be the main man. So, I think ultimately they want Højlund to continue and 16 goals, push on to 25 goals, and be that reliable, prolific striker. But of course, he'll get injured. There's lots of games. This Europa League. You know, United probably need two more number nines. Really,
Mm.
I know the game has changed, but obviously when they won the treble 25 years ago, they had four. World class top number nines. The game has changed. But certainly one more, maybe another. But as I said, it's a difficult pitch because anyone you would go to, you say, well, hang on, you've got Højlund there. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Yes, Sesko was certainly of interest. Of course, they'd looked at him in the past, but I think a player like that would say, well, what's my game time going to be like?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's as you say, a difficult position because essentially, if you're going to bring in another striker, who's going to be the main one and who's going to be the understudy? And as you say, you factor in egos, you factor in even price tags. It will potentially lead to another difficult situation for Man United to navigate themselves through. I know we're running out of time. I know you're incredibly busy, but I just wanted to talk quickly about any outgoings. We'll try and rattle through as many as we can before you have to go. But Jadon Sancho, of course, this is one individual who has hit the headlines, probably for all the wrong reasons in terms of the way he's left Manchester United, despite it only being a loan deal. He's impressed. I remember talking to some Borussia Dortmund fans actually ahead of the Champions League final, and they were saying that they would absolutely love for Jadon Sancho to stay at the club, that he's very well liked. He's a popular member of not only the squad, but as I say, the fan base. But of course, as we know, the money, more in particular, the wages are a big stumbling block. But what can you tell us? What have you heard about Jadon Sancho? And are there any talks
Yeah,
ongoing with clubs, maybe?
I think United still want to sell him. I think there was a little bit of doubt, obviously, with his upsurge in form back at Borussia Dortmund. I think even Sir Jim Ratcliffe sort of added some doubt about that when he was quoted. My understanding is that, yeah, Sancho, whoever's the manager, they feel like, look, I mean, frankly, they feel he hasn't played well enough since he was signed, but also it's hard to forgive that, especially if it's Ten Hag,
Mhm.
how he behaved. And I also think probably they were probably pleased how he played at Borussia Dortmund. It probably has increased his fee, but I think that was sort of hyped. That was done over the top slightly. I mean, if you look at his form in the Bundesliga since he was back, top of my head, I can't remember the goals and assists, but it was a handful. It was a small amount, and even in those games in the semi-final against Paris Saint-Germain, he was good. I don't think he was amazing. I can't remember too many times he beat a player, or he was good. He was certainly good, and he'll certainly have a very good career. But I don't think United ever thought, oh, we've made an awful mistake. Let's get him back in here. I think in terms of attitude and his form, um, it's not enough. But you're then looking for a player. I think United would want at least 35, 40 million from, which is about half of what they paid. So I think in terms of United's transfer budget, the two definite outgoings they definitely want to sell would be Mason Greenwood and Jadon Sancho, which in their dreams, in their ideal world, they would
200 million.
realize, well, not that much, but 70, 75, 80 million, those are two young players with a lot of talent.
Mm,
But again, a cloud over both of them. If
mm,
United would be delirious if they thought they could get 35 to 40
mm.
million for each of them. And that would hugely increase the transfer budget as well. But I don't know that I don't know. They certainly want to sell them. Whether they'll get those fees, I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Just quickly on, as you just mentioned there, Greenwood. Obviously, there are a couple of European clubs that are being linked at the very minimum with Mason Greenwood. Have you heard anything in terms of where his future may lie?
No, I think that there's certainly interest within Spain because we're very impressed. There's talk of Juventus. I know there's also some interest in the Premier League, but I think that would be a difficult for them as well because certainly if United feel like they can't keep him, which I think probably the correct decision, then the Premier League clubs,
Mm,
he would come back to England and think, well, in
yeah.
terms of a moral decision, they'll think, well, um, they'd have to deal with some backlash from their fans as well. So I think, yeah, United is certainly looking to sell to sell him. I mean, he's a hugely talented player, and it's going to be difficult to watch him thrive as he did in Spain last year. But I think, understandably, United have taken the right decision there, and I think Ineos, yeah, they saw what a circus it was last summer
Mm.
when the old regime at United had decided to bring him back.
Big
They saw,
U-turn, wasn't it? Yeah.
yeah, that was going to happen, and Ten Hag did want him back. Ten Hag did want him back, but the backlash was such that they reversed that decision. Obviously, sent him out on loan. Interesting, if you look at those. Well, it's a different regime now. They didn't say he would never play for United again. That was the assumption, but I don't think. Yeah, I don't think he will. I think he'll be sold.
Yeah, just one very final question, which I've left to the end quite intentionally because I think it could be a very interesting dynamic in terms of what we're going to see in a couple of months or so. Sorry, so just at the moment, I've got Darren Bent preparing for his show on Talksport knocking on the door. That's just absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? Good thing I locked that door so I don't get distracted. But just in terms of the very, very final question, it's about the captain, Bruno Fernandes. Now, of course, he alluded a little bit, and I think he's very honest, which can sometimes be taken in different directions in terms of what he actually meant and whatnot. But he said at the end of the day, if the club want him, he'll stay. If they don't, then he'll go. And I think also another big factor is the fact that he, of course, potentially could be waiting for the new manager of Manchester United to come in. Are they going to stick with Erik ten Hag? But in terms of Bruno Fernandes's future, look, I think he's at a position of his career in terms of age where he's probably thinking, right, the next 2-3 years are going to be at the top level, at the maximum output that he can put in. So what do you think is going to happen with Fernandes? Because I think this one could potentially be a big saga if of course it gets a bit of legs.
I think you're right. I think in short, I think he will stay. I mean, he's captain of Manchester United. He's lifted 2 trophies in the last year. Yes, there's been difficulties. I don't think he's totally against the idea of leaving, of moving. I think realistically, he's been at United for 4.5 years now.
Yeah, yeah,
And there have been difficult times. He does have 2 winners' medals, and that there was a European final, and I think he'd be frustrated that there hasn't been more success. And you've got to think realistically. He's not at heart a Manchester United fan. This is his career. If there was the opportunity to go to Barcelona or Bayern Munich, you would be mad not to consider it. I think that's reasonable. But I think he will stay at United because he's been hugely successful there in terms of his goals, assists. He's now the captain. I think there is a bond there. I mean, we try and sentimentalize it, but I think there is a strong bond there. I think that has developed. That will be hard for him to walk away from. So I think he'll stay. But yeah, he'll certainly. I think he'd certainly stay under Ten Hag, and I think if you think he was United's, I think United's best player. Any new manager would be mad to even if it's not Ten Hag, to rip it up and move him on.
yeah.
So I think he'll stay.
Yeah, well, I'm very sure, Sam, that you will be joining me again because there's so many questions around Manchester United at the moment that it almost feels like it's never ending. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of not just myself, but the MPB YouTube channel, we appreciate greatly your work, not just with ourselves, but within the media. It's always amazing to have brilliant contacts like yourself bringing us all the latest news. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And thank you, of course, to everyone who has
That's all
watched
right.
today's episode, to mufcMPB's YouTube channel. Please be sure, like, subscribe. I say it all the time, but it really does help us drive individuals like Sam to join us and give you brilliant updates as we always try to do here. So as I say, like, subscribe, follow Sam on social media as well. He's absolutely superb. Please be sure to join me again next week while I'll be joined again by another brilliant guest to bring you, as I say, all the latest on Manchester United. Have a good day, everyone, and stay safe. Subscribe to the MUFC MPB YouTube channel.